What's up everyone? Alex here. With the omission of Shin Megami Tensei from its name, Atlus is signaling that they intend on building Soul Hackers into its own series. And with the higher than expected sales for Shin Megami Tensei 5 and the ever-increasing popularity of Persona, who can blame them? That said, these games do have a ton in common with each other, especially when it comes to Fusion and its catalog of demons. So how exactly will Soul Hackers differentiate itself from SMT and Persona? And more importantly, who will enjoy Soul Hackers 2? Let's find out. This video was made possible by viewers like you, so please leave a like, post a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. In Soul Hackers 2, you play the role of Ringo, and together with Fig, you are tasked by an AI collective known as Aeon to prevent the end of days. Your investigations will lead you to 3 individuals, each with ties to a mysterious organization known as the Phantom Society. Together, you'll seek to unravel the various covenants that are set to move the eldritch machinations that'll plunge the world into chaos. Soul Hackers 2 is being developed and published by Atlus, who provided this review code shown running on the PS5. While Soul Hackers 2 will still have you gathering and fusing demons into more powerful beings, that's where the similarities between it and the other 2 series end. What you have here is a progression system that takes these familiar elements and combines them with a party-based system that has you creating character-specific builds depending on their affinities. These affinities determine whether or not you can boost certain elemental potencies for any demon that character has equipped, with each having elements that they simply cannot boost. These boosts can come in the form of mystiques, which are often received as gifts from demons after you've unlocked all of their abilities, as well as summoner skills that you can obtain as you go through a character's soul matrix. I'll elaborate on what the soul matrix is later in this video, but all you need to know is that there's so much more you can do in Soul Hackers 2 beyond demon gathering and fusion that distinguishes itself from its more popular siblings. And ultimately, all of these new bells and whistles make for fantastic additions to mechanics that fans might feel that they're super familiar with, providing a rich variety and focus that makes Soul Hackers 2 more than just another spin-off SMT series. And before you ask, no, you don't have to select tricky dialogue choices to negotiate with demons to get them in your party. But again, more on that later. In an early video that I made about Soul Hackers 2, I mentioned that the new stack system could be the series rebrand on SMT's press turn, where you can earn additional turns by hitting enemy weaknesses. Shortly after starting the game, however, I quickly found out that I was completely mistaken. In fact, Soul Hackers 2 does not feature a press turn-like system at all. Much like Shin Megami Tensei, you're able to select all of your party's actions without interruption from your enemies, alternating between your party and the groups of demons you've encountered until one group is completely defeated. As you hit enemies with their weaknesses, you'll slowly build up stack, which increments on the top right corner of the screen and will also display a shadowy version of the demon who nailed said weakness in the background. After your entire party has executed their actions and have built up at least one stack, the demons in the background will emerge and unleash the Sabbath, dealing massive damage based on how much stack you built up. Think of this like an all-out attack from the Persona series, and you've got the right idea. However, much like how Soul Hacker 2's combat might seem familiar, there's so much more to Sabbath than meets the eye. Later on, demons can learn special skills called tandem abilities, which will randomly trigger during Sabbath. You can choose which tandem ability to trigger if multiple options are available, and their benefits range from healing or buffing your party to applying status effects or stealing items from enemies, to name a few. You might also think that the maximum stack you're able to build up is merely proportional to the number of party members you have, which is 4. With summoner skills, you can learn passives that can increase your stack buildup, potentially allowing you to stack every single character you're carrying around, which also increases the likelihood of tandem abilities to trigger. The highest stack I've ever gotten was 12, and you can pretty much imagine how much damage that Sabbath dealt. And finally, you'll also get a suite of abilities called Commander Skills, which will allow you to do things like increase the amount of stack you build up, on top of other stack bonuses, as well as the ability to change demons in the middle of combat. These skills can be invoked during your party's turn, though you'll need to wait after a certain number of turns in order for specific commander skills to become available again. That said, these charges do carry over from battle to battle, so you can theoretically charge your commander skills in easier fights in preparation for a big battle. This is merely a small sampling of all the cool skills and features you can play with in Soul Hackers 2, and I have to admit that all of these additions have made the game a ton of fun to play. I do believe that by adding new features on top of the existing Demon Gathering infusion, that the developers managed to create an addictive gameplay loop that just exponentially makes you and your party feel more powerful the further you progress. This ultimately makes the game easier, of course, so if challenge is what you're looking for, don't hesitate to select the hardest difficulty available. That being said, if you're like me and you love tinkering around and experimenting with different options and ways to make your character powerful, Soul Hacker 2's systems will more than satisfy your needs. If this screenshot of this dungeon map excites you, then you'll probably enjoy Soul Hackers 2's dungeons. Kidding aside, Soul Hackers 2's dungeons are cavernous, with ladder levels featuring a dungeon-wide gimmick. Unfortunately, they're just not interesting to look at. And given how you'll be spending hours in these places, this was a bit disappointing to me. The motifs of the first story dungeons felt very similar, as you'll be asked to explore miles of train station tunnels and other tunnel-like locales whose layouts feel as though they were designed by someone who had excessive amounts of graphing paper. None of these levels are procedurally generated, by the way. This is all to say that Soul Hackers 2's dungeons are unfortunately just drab, bereft of the characteristics of dungeons in either Persona or SMT. Even Tartarus in Persona 3, with its procedurally generated hallways, had more personality and character than any of Soul Hackers 2's dungeons. These dungeons are simply a means to an end, serving as playgrounds for you to try out your new toys. My dungeon exhaustion also probably has something to do with how much I get tasked with going back into these places, thanks to the many requests I got. I want to stress that these requests are worth it, especially if you want to unlock some really cool features. But this also means that whatever you choose to do in Soul Hackers 2 is entirely up to you, which also makes it so that you can go overboard with just engaging in one particular activity, burning yourself out in the process. A healthy balance of dungeon exploration, demon fusion, hangouts, the game's take on social links, and main story progression is highly recommended. While in these dungeons, you'll encounter the demons from your party all across the map in lieu of traditional treasure chests. It's through these encounters that you'll be able to recruit demons, who will either join readily or charge you HP or MP for their services, replenish your health, give you items, or money. Unlike treasure chests, however, these demons will keep respawning. So if you've got a knack for fully exploring an entire dungeon floor to get all the goods, this might sound infuriating, especially given that this will be tough to keep track of. I suspect that one of the conversations that'll surround Soul Hacker 2's release is its perceived lower quality presentation. Some people posited in their previews that this might be due to a lower budget when compared to SMT or Persona, but I see a couple of problems with this perspective. For one, we don't, and probably will never know, how much budget was spent on Soul Hackers 2, and thus, these individuals are essentially making assumptions. And two, taking this perspective is insulting to the literal thousands of indie developers who are able to create incredible looking games with a significantly lower budget. I am choosing to instead focus on the fact that Soul Hacker 2's presentation is part of its search for its own visual identity, with the hopes of finding one that can help make it stand out from its siblings. When flanked by Persona's ever-improving presentation quality and Shin Megami Tensei's continuous doubling down on its post-apocalyptic aesthetics, it's incredibly daunting for anyone to create a new visual language that can set Soul Hackers further apart from these juggernauts. Indeed, Soul Hackers already had an uphill battle ever since it was announced that it won't have the Shin Megami Tensei moniker. That being said, Soul Hackers 2 still looks really good. It's just that some of its aesthetics are not as visually stimulating as Persona 5's. And to be fair, with that high of a bar, anything less than that would be incredibly disappointing. Look elsewhere, and there's actually a lot to admire, such as the gorgeous character models inspired by Shiro Miwa's concept and designs. And when you see beyond its drab dungeons, there are locations and places that give us a sense of how one lives their life in the mid-21st century, and more importantly, where Soul Hacker's future visual direction could potentially go. To me, the game's lively use of color in these city areas are purposely meant to contrast with the sameness of its dungeon environs, almost begging us to come back every single time. After all, a splash of vibrance can cut through the drudgery of monotony. Apart from its story dungeons, Soul Hackers 2 features a dungeon similar to Persona 5's Mementos. Unlike that dungeon, however, this Soul Matrix, as it's called, is a lot more important, and it is tied to a mechanic called Soul Level. Instead of a traditional social link system, Soul Hackers 2 instead keeps tracks of each character's soul level that can be increased either by selecting certain dialogue choices during the main story, or calling up certain party members and hanging out at Bar Hadron. By increasing this, you'll be able to open gates in the Soul Matrix that require you to meet a minimum soul level. Venturing deeper into a character's Soul Matrix will reveal much more about their past, shining a light on their motivations and aspirations. And afterwards, both Ringo and said character will be given opportunities to learn summoner skills, which I mentioned repeatedly earlier in this video. These character moments, the hangouts, the main story beats, and the revelations via the Soul Matrix are the parts of Soul Hacker 2's narrative that I really appreciate. Because unlike the social links in the Persona series, each character is intrinsically connected to the events of the main story. This isn't a situation in Persona where a high school student becomes a victim of circumstance. Rather, every character plays a part in the unraveling of Soul Hacker 2's plot, including how Ringo happens upon them. And while Soul Hacker 2's narrative is a bit simpler when compared to Persona and SMT, I find that these character moments make up for the lack of complicated twists and turns that its siblings are eager to give players. This admission might be a point of contention to many, and believe me, I've mulled this repeatedly as I've played through the game and written this review. However, it's through this perspective that we find Soul Hacker 2's identity, and this is something that the other audience, who didn't like the high school settings of Persona and SMT5, might appreciate more. For the exception of both Ringo and Fig, the other characters in your party are grown adults, each with their own jobs. It's through their trials and tribulations with their occupations that we get to know more about themselves. And if you happen upon this video after playing through the game, you might think that I'm overly simplifying things here. But if you read between the lines, these characters are really upset with specific aspects of their chosen occupation. And to hammer the point home, they choose to share some of this over a drink or two at the bar, where none of the high school students of Persona and SMT5 would have been allowed to linger. It's through this perspective that Soul Hackers 2 has chosen its identity. This is a game about grown adults, each with their own complicated and messy relationships that are framed differently from the relationships of high school students of Persona, or even the supernatural heroism of SMT5. This is reflected throughout the game through its noticeably different dialogue tone and cadence, and the way its characters handle certain situations. One of my favorite scenes in Soul Hackers 2, and don't worry, I won't spoil it for you, revolves around two characters who have had to resolve a past history together, and to my surprise, they talked it out and reached an amicable solution. None of the over-the-top melodrama that Persona would have written instead. That being said, I love Persona's melodrama, and admittedly, after heading into Soul Hackers 2 with the expectation of encountering said writing, I can understand how others might fall prey to the same idea and feel disappointed. I am still of the mind that its main story could use some more clever twists and turns. But after playing through the game for 60 hours and getting to know my party really well, I wouldn't want to trade my experience for anything else in the world. I've just fallen in love with each and every one of them, flaws and all. Regardless of how I see it, Soul Hackers 2 is going to be a divisive game, just by virtue of how many new things it tries out. It's a bit disappointing to see that the ambition found elsewhere got lost when designing its dungeon aesthetics and layouts, though it makes it up with its even more mature take on the usual SMT formula, mixed with a fantastic iteration on its combat and progression that sits on top of the series' tried and true mechanics. It's through these lenses that you'll find enjoyment in Soul Hackers 2. And if you're someone who wants a bit of fresh air from the series' press turn mechanics, and being yet another high school student, I think it'll be well worth the experience. Thank you for watching my review of Soul Hackers 2. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. I'd also love to hear what you think of this game and this review, so post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. And if you've been a longtime subscriber, I'd like to invite you to join the $5 tier on my Patreon and gain early access to my videos at patreon.com/backlogbattle. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.